Welcome to my channel Living Linux. In this video I'm going to test PlayStation Portable and PlayStation 2 Emulation on the Raspberry Pi 5 running Ubuntu 23.10. And this is something that might be interesting for later on, but this is the Mesa Information. And one of the things that I noticed is that with Ubuntu that the OpenGL performance is not as good as it is on Raspberry Pi OS. So what I did see is that this one on Raspberry Pi OS, it's different. So it has RPi2 at the end. So I don't know if that really means anything. If they compiled it for Raspberry Pi OS with some patches for the Raspberry Pi 5. But there's definitely a difference between Mesa on Raspberry Pi OS and on the Raspberry Pi Ubuntu version. So I'm not really sure what it is, but perhaps we'll hear about this in the future. But coming back to PlayStation Portable emulation. So it is possible to install it as a flatpak because it is available for ARM. But what I noticed was that I installed it, but I was not able to choose Vulkan. So I don't recommend installing it like this. So what I did was I compiled it. So you need to install git, sudo apt install git. Once you have git, then you can clone the source code. You have to install all these packages, and from there I went to compiling with cmake and also installing these packages. Now, when I compiled it, I got an error, and that it said it wasn't able to find the glue header file. So I also installed libglu1 mesa-dev. And once that was done, I was able to start PPSSPP. So we go to the build directory. So here we have the SDL file. So as you can see here, I can choose between OpenGL and Vulkan. I'm going with Vulkan. Rendering resolution, the original resolution. For a game like Monster Hunter Freedom, you can choose 2x resolution. But if you want to play God of War, then it's better to stay on the original PlayStation Portable resolution. So if we start, so let's get to the game. So when it's loading, then you see some frame drops, but once everything is loaded, then it looks like you can play this on the original PlayStation Portable resolution. Well, I guess that's enough for now. So yeah, in my case, I just compiled it myself. I was able to choose Vulkan, and then I'm able to play it on the original resolution. And for simpler games, then you can try some higher resolution. I also tested AetherSX2, and AetherSX2 is distributed as an app image. So usually you have to install Fuse to run it, but if you don't want to install Fuse, because I saw a video from someone else and he said there was some problem installing Fuse. It's not mandatory to install Fuse. Well, first of all, you need to make sure that the app image is executable. So let's say you want to start AetherSX2. In my case, let's just say version 1.5. Yeah, so it tells you it requires Fuse, but it also gives you the hint that if you use this option, then you can actually extract the files and then it places them in the directory squashfs root, and then you can run this. So I think this is already with the executable flag. So in my case, I tested several versions, so I renamed these directories to the version names. So let's just say we're going to go for 1.5. Oh, no, don't. Just run it as a program. So let's have a look here. Multi-threaded, VU1, enabled by default. So yeah, it only works properly with Vulkan. Not perfect, but most of the things work. And you can also see that you can actually choose the adapter. So in this case, if I go with OpenGL, then I can't choose the adapter. So that's usually a sign that OpenGL is not properly set up. And I'm setting it to native resolution. So I've tested Final Fantasy X, and most of the things, they run at a reasonable speed, but there's some very interesting, well, here it already says that something is not supported. And I'm not really sure if that's the cause for one of the severe performance issues. What I do notice is that it looks like it's not using the full color palette. Because you see some banding issues. And I think that's caused by a small color palette. Reminds me of the days when I was playing games on a Amiga. So this all looks okay. So most of the 3D rendering, that's looks reasonable. But there's one effect with, let's just say, the title, the letters. And I also saw that performance issue early on my Samsung Galaxy Flip 3 with the Snapdragon 888, but it was fixed later on, so I'm not really sure why I'm seeing this performance issue on the Raspberry Pi 5. So here you see that the frame rate just drops a lot and it's not really fun anymore. I also noticed that when there's sort of like menu overlays, we see the same thing. The scene where you are asked to autograph, that's where you can put in your name, and that also dropped back to 1 frame per second. It was really hard to get through that menu. So this demi attack is also usually where you see some performance issue. I mean, it's not even so bad here. So here you also see that there's an overlay or something like that, and it really kills the performance. I'm not really sure what it is, or that I can improve things with some settings. but at least Final Fantasy X is not really playable like this. So some people, they might wonder, like, well, isn't it possible to run it with OpenGL instead of Vulkan and see if that improves things? So let's just say we choose OpenGL, and then it tells us OpenGL 3.1 is not good enough. So there is a trick for that. So so we're here. Oops. So I found this website, and then they say that if you do this, then you can spoof a higher OpenGL version. And if we do glxinfo again, you can also see that it reports 3.3 now. So if we start AetherSX2 now, and we've set it to OpenGL, well, we still can't choose the adapter. Well, it also is noticing some problems. Well, you can see here that, for instance, the top part, it's not rendered properly. So also the text effect for the title, that's also where get a lot of issues with the performance. Here you can see that all the characters, they're not rendered. So yeah, at the moment OpenGL is not really an option. So if I compare this with a Rockchip RK3588, I was actually able to run AetherSX2 with better results by spoofing a higher OpenGL version. But like I said at the start, perhaps if we compile Mesa in a different way, like it was compiled for Raspberry Pi OS, perhaps we'll get some better results. As a last thing, I had a hard time taking screenshots with Raspberry Pi OS on the Raspberry Pi 5, and I think that's because they switched to Wayland. And well, I found this video from Peter Schneider, and let's see if we can get over there. So some other people already noticed that there were some problems with taking screenshots on the Raspberry Pi 5, and the solution at the moment is just use Grim from the command line. That one works. So that was also I took this screenshot with Grim. You can also see it here at the bottom. But yeah, I think that's something that the Raspberry Pi organization needs to improve because, well, of course, you can always manually cut out the window or those kind of things, but would be nice to have a proper screenshot program. So yeah, perhaps I'm biased because yeah, I've been playing with Rockchip RK3588 single board computers for quite some time now, and well, my expectation was that the Raspberry Pi 5 was going to take on the Rockchip RK3588, and so far it doesn't look like that the Raspberry Pi 5 is able to do so. I assume that the OpenGL support and the Vulkan support probably will improve, but I have the suspicion that from a performance point of view, that the Pi 5 will never be as fast as a Rockchip RK3588, especially when it comes to emulation. But we'll have to see what happens in the future. You can argue that the Rockchip RK3588 has been around for quite some time now, so software support has had some time to improve. So now it's time for the Raspberry Pi 5 to see if it will live up to its reputation. So that's all for now, and I hope to see you again in my next video.